The fundamental difference between being diagnosed with selective mutism and also shyness or having a timid temperament is the amount of functionality that an individual has. So many kids suffer in silence for years unnecessarily. The biggest mistake is focusing on talking when that child is not ready to talk. The biggest mistake is thinking therapy alone is enough. How do you run a play date? What strategies do you use? When you're out and about doing exposures in the real world, how do you approach a store clerk?
Welcome back to another episode of the Unspoken Words podcast, a selective mutism podcast by the Smart Center, produced and published by New Edition Productions. This episode features our latest installment of our Ask Dr. E series, where we sit down with Dr. E and ask her real questions from listeners. In this episode, we answer 5 questions about SM, including how to distinguish SM from extreme shyness, recognizing behavioral indicators across different settings, understanding the diagnostic process, common mistakes to avoid when helping children with SM, and knowing when to seek professional help. Before we get started, if you have any questions on anything you hear in today's episode, please head to selectivemutismcenter.org/askdre, that's ASKDRE, and enter your question. The team reads all of your submissions and does their best to answer them on podcast episodes like this one, blog posts, and on social media. And speaking of social media, make sure you're following the podcast on Instagram and YouTube. We post the best cuts from this episode and every episode on both of those platforms. We are at Unspoken Words _podcast over on Instagram and Unspoken Words Podcast by Dr. E on YouTube. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Dr. E on the Unspoken Words podcast.
Hi everyone, it's Dr. E. Before we get started with today's episode, I'm so excited to announce that our popular Selective Mutism in the School virtual conference is now available as a self-paced online course. The conference dives into how to assess the mute child, testing for common comorbidities, and proven strategies and interventions to support students with SM within the school. And of course, we dive into accommodations and interventions such as 504s and IEPs. The course offers 5.5 continuing education credits from most professionals, so parents share this opportunity with your child's school. To sign up, just head to our website or check the description in this podcast episode. Together, we can create a world where every child has a voice. Now, enjoy the episode.
All right. Hey, Dr. E, how are you?
Hi, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for another episode of Ask Dr. E. We have some really, really good questions today. We've kind of been pooling these into a separate bucket because we feel like they're like really general, basic questions that a lot of people are going to want to know. So we've been saving them for the last few months, and I'm excited to ask you all of them, all 5, and get your answers. Talk through them a little bit.
Absolutely. I'm excited about it because it gives me an opportunity to really dive deep, but yet the basics of what you need to know about what selective mutism really is, because there seems to be a lot of confusion out there about kind of what is SM and how to approach SM. And so I'm really excited. And I love my Ask Dr. E's because it gives me a chance to kind of share my knowledge. And that's my favorite thing and the purpose of this podcast.
All right, yeah, let's get right into it. Got some good questions. All right, the first 2 questions are going to be on core understanding and identification of selective mutism. Starting with question number 1: what is the fundamental difference between selective mutism and extreme shyness, and how can parents or teachers recognize when a child has crossed from one to the other?
Wow, this is a big meat and potato question, isn't it? So I would say that although the majority of individuals with selective mutism have a more timid, shy temperament, although for those that know of my work and have children or teens or even adults who aren't that shy, it kind of can be confusing. Like, why are they not shy if they're, they don't seem shy, but yet they're not speaking? I would say the fundamental difference between being diagnosed with selective mutism and also shyness or having a timid temperament is the amount of functionality that an individual has. They're functioning. Those that are shy can function, perhaps. How much they function varies from individual to individual, whether they have a social anxiety presentation, because shyness, being timid, is a factor into social anxiety, right? So that is an anxiety disorder. So functionality really is the key question there. Many individuals that are shy can speak. It doesn't mean they're elaborative, initiative. It doesn't mean that they're expressive in their language. It doesn't mean that they will go up to others and ask questions. Perhaps they have the social anxiety or extreme shyness. But the primary difference is communication. Individuals with selective mutism are consistently, in at least one setting, mute. They are not speaking in at least one setting, such as at school, with peers and or teachers, or out and about in the real world, in stores and restaurants if someone questions them, during play dates perhaps, or get-togethers. Perhaps at family functions, people ask questions and they don't speak. Even with some warm-up, many don't speak. So we think of functioning in 4 ways. Social functioning. Social functioning can affect social anxiety and shyness, extreme shyness, where it is an anxiety disorder. Emotional functioning, anxiety, affecting your ability to function emotionally in a setting. Anxiety leading to depression, not being able to get up and go and reach your full potential. Your emotional functioning really causes dysfunction, I guess you could say. I'm kind of social, emotional, academic. Many individuals with SM may struggle academically because of the extreme anxiety in their ability to communicate. So those with social anxiety may also be affected academically, not reaching their potential, perhaps having difficulty starting, completing tasks, sharing their thoughts and ideas. Communication, mutism versus shyness, is really about not speaking consistently in at least one setting. So where teachers and parents need to be aware is how much dysfunction is their lack of communication causing across the realms of social, emotional, academic, and communication. And communication is the biggest difference between shyness and selective mutism because of the mutism.
So if you have one of those 4, which is the most common that you see? And if you have one of the 4, is that even possible, or is it usually all 4?
Actually, it's interesting you asked that question. I look at it as pillars, right? Like almost bar graphs. And what I do when I talk to families and we're making decisions on whether a child should go from preschool to kindergarten or kindergarten to first grade, or, how do we base this? Whether they do need maybe additional therapy, obviously therapy to help them become a more functioning being, to develop coping skills, decisions on whether to use or not use medication. We will talk about what the therapy, because obviously most will benefit obviously from therapy, parent education, child therapy, teacher education. That's critical because kids just don't walk in with a guidebook. So the most important is being able to see how much dysfunction is an individual struggling with. I have individuals that struggle emotionally. They can't leave the house, school refusal. Their anxiety is preventing them from seeing or getting together with friends. They shut down. They hide in a car going to visit a relative. They shut down when someone asks them a question out and about in a store or a restaurant. A relative tries to engage them and the child just hides behind their parent or shuts down, goes up to their room. They're not functioning, right? Even perhaps with some warm up. And so we see that like emotional dysfunction. The social function the same way. They're just not wanting to get together with individuals. They're avoidant. They shut down. They don't make eye contact. Their head is down. They're not projecting confidence. They're projecting kind of avoidance, and others see that. So their social functioning. Eventually, some of these individuals don't even want to get together with others. They will say, no, I don't want to. I don't like this person. I don't like being around these kids. And they'll make excuses. So their social functioning, which is so important for your emotional well-being, to have a social interaction, right? So we will measure that on like a bar graph. Academically, I have very bright students or students that function from Ys of SM or dysfunction, that are struggling academically, starting, completing tests, needing redirection, prompting, not reaching their potential, below grade level, or at grade level, but perhaps they have a very high IQ and they're gifted, but in school they can't function. So we see this and we have to determine, is there another why, a learning challenge perhaps, or is it extreme, avoidance from anxiety, and what is the cause of anxiety? Now, one of the challenges with SM is figuring out those whys. And the reason I'm bringing it up with this shyness is, yes, the majority of individuals will present with timidity, having a social anxiety presentation, but their communication is so impaired that it causes them dysfunction beyond shyness. So do you see what I mean? Now, I have many individuals with SM that are not shy, Brandon. So that typical dictionary case of a shy child, timid with their hand over their mouth, doesn't always play a role. And so then why are these individuals selectively mute? They aren't speaking consistently in at least one setting for at least a month, though it's causing them difficulty, obviously, in that setting. And then you need to look at those other whys that we talk so much about. So if your child is not timid or socially anxious, and they are selectively mute, where they're mute in at least one setting consistently for at least a month, and it's impacting their ability to engage and communicate, you need to think about, why is that occurring? And unfortunately, many will think, oh, these kids are just being defiant. If I went out on a limb, Brandon, and said that I've never met a defiant child that is mute from defiance, I see mutism as a defiance becomes almost like a defense mechanism when they can't do something. So if you see a defiant child, why are they being defiant? It's not causing their SM. SM doesn't cause anything. It's a result of. I want to repeat that. SM is a result of. SM is a social communication anxiety that has factors into the development and maintenance of the mutism. And there are baseline stages that an individual functions at. And once we understand those whys, we understand those stages and all of the settings they engage in, then we're able to begin to think about progression of communication and building coping skills and training parents and training teachers. It's critical to understand that if you approach a child, all children with SM, from a shyness standpoint and an extreme shyness standpoint, you are missing a large percentage of children with selective mutism or teens with SM. And often when kids are older or adults that we work with, it's those other reasons that stop them from communicating. Perhaps it's severe social anxiety, but there are other reasons as well. And we really need to dive into that.
So let's jump into question number 2. What are the most common behavioral indicators of selective mutism in different settings? And how does the condition typically manifest itself differently at home versus at school?
I would say that a child's functioning at home is their baseline. It's like what they're capable of. However, there's never an easy answer to this, because we have a percentage of families that present where a child was verbal, perhaps, and is now not verbal at home, either with both parents, family, one parent. So that's not common, but we see it. And these children become what we call pervasively mute, where they're not speaking perhaps in all settings, but they were speaking at one point. And you have to kind of figure out and deal with what may have caused that. So I need to put that off on the side, because that's not the typical presentation, but we see it. So how a child communicates, engages, functions in the home environment is usually the safest place, the place that they're functioning the most, and their capability. If a child has an underlying, let's say, speech and language, 30-40% of individuals with SM, they will have that challenge at home. We will see them have difficulty in the home environment. So what's interesting, even learning and processing difficulties, ADHD, other processing issues, neurodivergence ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, you will see these symptoms in the home environment. So very often, the home environment is a window into the whys, because a child that has these other whys will have them at home, where what you don't often see at home in a safe place, where is their extreme shyness, because they're comfortable at home. You don't tend to see that at home very much. The child may be almost outgoing in the home environment. It's when they come out and about in a social setting. So the typical dictionary case of a shy child that's timid, that gets overwhelmed in a setting such as stores, restaurants, public settings. They usually get overwhelmed in the louder, larger, lots of people places. What will happen is they may walk around with their parent or their sibling. They may talk to their parent or sibling, but the minute somebody else engages them, a store clerk, a waiter, a waitress, a coach on a soccer team, a parent, a friend's parent, an extended relative they haven't seen, the child will often disengage. So what that appearance would be is they may be, the way I look at it, it's almost like the glass house phenomenon. The glass house phenomenon is the child is walking around in their glass house. They're walking in let's give this store as an example. Most people do go to a store unless they're like me and order Instacart all the time. But they're walking around a store in their glass house. They're walking around. Mom, I want the Apple Jacks up there. Or Mom, let's go and get that over there. Friends, I want to get that art activity. And they're talking to their parent. All of a sudden, a store clerk comes up and says, hey, can I help you? And the child gets a blank look. They will just kind of get a deer in the headlight look and look towards their parent. And they'll just kind of shut down and maybe turn away. That's almost like a typical young child, elementary age child, or they will ignore that person. So many individuals with SM will go to a stage 0 even when they were talking with their parent or siblings. So what parents need to look out for is, what is your child like when others who they don't know well engage them, who question them? This is why when we're working through treatment, we're helping with social engagement via handover takeover, front line, going during off hours, quieter, less people are around, smaller environments, playing different games, doing different goals for older kids, preparing common questions, using visuals, hearing choices to minimize the need to think and process. I can go on and on with 1,000,010 strategies that we will use for many individuals with selective mutism. It's how you use it. So what parents need to look for is what I just described. Some families will tell me, someone will ask a question and they'll naturally turn to the parent and give the answer without any prompting. That's a verbal intermediary. For kids that aren't engaging, we may use that verbal intermediary in a very strategic way. Some kids are very stuck. No matter how comfortable they get, they look like professional mimes. We may use other strategies that we add into treatment. Sounds to words, ritual sound approach. It's knowing what stages those children or teens are at to begin to think about what strategies would work best with those individuals, taking into account their whys. Teachers need to see a child that is engaging in class or not engaging. The child may look comfortable perhaps, but they're not interacting. They're not engaging with peers. Maybe they have one peer they're comfortable with, perhaps through outside get-togethers, and they're with that peer in class. And of course, there's 1,000,010 accommodations, interventions that we can put into place. The buddy process. How do you work the buddy process? Small groups. How do you work small groups? How do you develop a 504 or an IEP? That's the individual nature. But what teachers need to think about, how is this child functioning in your classroom? Are they functioning academically? Are they functioning socially? Are they functioning emotionally? And how are they communicating? What stage are they communicating? Are they mute in the classroom, with peers one-on-one, with teachers one-on-one, in small groups, in large groups? To capture a lot of this information, we have teachers fill out something called the Selective Mutism School Evaluation Form. For parents, we have them go through something called the Selective Mutism Evaluation, where we will screen for the whys. We will assess their baseline stages. We will begin to see what strategies work best for progression during that evaluation to set us up for their treatment, to know how to begin treatment. Because it's not just, a child that's not speaking, extreme shyness. Let's do whatever we can to get them to talk. That approach is wrong. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's wrong. You need to understand that individual, because if you don't meet them where they're at to start the process, you will lose them. They will become more avoidant, they'll become more anxious, and it's going to lead to frustration all around for parents, for teachers, and for that child or teen. So we have to meet them where they're at and then move. It doesn't mean they have to be the most comfortable individual in the world to make progress. Absolutely not. The goals and games set up are somewhat challenging, but not too challenging that they can't accomplish it with the right teacher and parent facilitation.
Okay. All right. That was great. Let's move on to question number 3. This is now shifting gears a little bit more towards assessment and diagnosis. So the question is, what is the formal diagnostic process for selective mutism? And how do professionals differentiate selective mutism from other conditions like social anxiety disorder, speech disorders, or just developmental delays?
So we kind of touched on this in the last 2 questions, actually, really well. I would say that it's important to know the definition of selective mutism or the diagnostic criteria. The consistent failure to speak in certain social situations like school or social gatherings for at least 1 month. The ability to speak in other situations, such as at home with family, so they can speak in at least one setting consistently. This disturbance is not due to lack of knowledge or of comfort with the language. In other words, they know how to speak. Let's say English. They know English. That doesn't mean we don't have a percentage of bilingual, multilingual individuals that speak a different language or multiple languages at home. That definitely plays a role, and their comfort in the English language can certainly affect their confidence to have communication. And that is something we address in treatment for those families. The failure to speak is not better explained by another mental disorder, such as autism spectrum disorder, social anxiety, or communication disorder. First of all, that is very old-fashioned because autism spectrum disorder is not a mental disorder, it's a neurodivergent disorder. But I would say that it can be also with that. This is where I disagree with DSM, because kids with SM, I think one of the problems this is either missed or kids go years unnecessarily suffering is because many clinicians, teachers, educators, parents don't see the connection between these other whys. I would say this is a tremendous aspect to my life's work, is figuring out what other reasons contribute to a child's selective mutism. So when we at the Smart Center do the selective mutism evaluation, and it can be for treatment with us or used for school, IEPs, 504s, or other professionals, because they get a full-blown report. It's a selective mutism evaluation where we assess for speech and language. We screen for it. We want to see the child's understanding of language, their expressive language skills. We screen for learning and processing difficulties by how we ask questions and the information we get from parents and from teachers. The SM school evaluation form is incredibly valuable. So we screen for developmental challenges, processing difficulties, sensory processing difficulties. Quite a large percentage of individuals with selective mutism are either highly sensitive, where loud, large, lots of people environments, in the easiest way of looking at it, shut them down, or they have sensory processing disorder, where it can cause them so much stress and anxiety. Tags, tactile, picky eaters, sounds, visual processing. It can all affect the child or teen's ability to function because it can overwhelm them. Think about a classroom with how much is going on in that classroom. So if you're too busy trying to process the world around you for a variety of reasons. So what is anxiety, Brandon? Anxiety for you, for me, for somebody else may be completely different. The key for selective mutism is to figure out what is causing them that anxiety. Yes, a large percentage have social anxiety. They may or may not have some of these other whys. So here's a question for you. If 92% of individuals with SM, they say 92% meet the diagnostic criteria for social anxiety, what is it about those other 8? They may not have social anxiety, but they're selectively mute, and those whys come into play. So then you may say, well, wait, if it's only 8%, that's not a high percentage. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Although 90 some percent meet the criteria for social anxiety, way more than 8% of kids with SM have other whys in addition to the social anxiety that may be the straw that broke the camel's back, that may be the factor that led to SM more than the social anxiety, and may be causing it to continue despite treatment. And if the treatment is focused on talking and rewards for talking when these other whys are coming into play, then guess what? You're going to cause more anxiety, more avoidance, more shutdown, more confusion. And this poor child is going to just keep going the other way because they're misunderstood. This is why focusing on the whole person and not just the symptom is critical. I mean, Brandon, this is my life's work, and I swear by it, because we see so many kids every day, so many teens every day at the Smart Center where they've been in treatment for so long, but they just never overcame it, or they never made a lot of progress. And I believe when we see them, it seems so simple in so many ways. Those whys were missed, and the misunderstanding of where they were in their stages. They were focused so much on talking without realizing those kids, those teens weren't even engaging. They weren't even able to hand and take. They weren't even able to turn to a parent and tell an answer or appear in class. They were not able to do that. And so what happens is when the focus is on talking, go up and ask a question without preparing, without visual supports, without parent facilitation perhaps, without teacher awareness to how to accommodate and apply those interventions, you're causing more anxiety and avoidance. And so many kids suffer in silence for years unnecessarily. Because guess what? Courage isn't loud, which means just handing money to a store clerk, standing closer to a peer in school, be willing to have a get together, be willing to go to an aunt's house and with the parent or the sibling hand something over. So for those individuals, the smallest little step is courageous. So if we're focusing so much on talking when they're not ready, and for all the wonderful professionals out there in this world that have experience and understand this isn't an issue because they're addressing it. But I would say for all professionals listening, for all parents listening, for all educators listening, really meet those children where they are, understand who they are, understand the person, not just their speaking characteristics, because it may work for some, but for so many that approach does not work. Hey listeners, we'll get back to the episode in a second. I want to tell you about Communicamp, our popular 3+ day intensive group treatment and all-day parent education and support program designed to help parents, children, and teens overcome selective mutism, social anxiety, and extreme shyness. Over 3+ action-packed days, your child or teen will engage in immersive activities guided by expert clinicians that build confidence and communication skills in a supportive, fun, and collaborative environment. Spaces are limited and spots book up fast. To learn more, please find Communicamp in this episode's description or head to communicamp.org and complete our interest form, and our team will be in touch. Let's help your child or teen find their voice at Communicamp. Let's get back to the episode.
Well, let's move on to question number 4. This is more treatment intervention related. What are the most common mistakes that parents, teachers, and even professionals make when trying to help a child with SM, and what approaches should be avoided?
I think that it's about understanding first, right? So we talk about behavioral treatment, right? To be able to help shape behaviors, cognitive behavioral treatment, which is a big piece of SCAT. SCAT is social communication anxiety treatment. And really, it's a conglomeration of evidence-based treatments. It includes behavioral and shaping their environments and modeling and so forth. But it's also very cognitive, where we help kids understand their feelings. We teach them the bridge. We help them understand how their thoughts, their feelings lead to behaviors. We help them understand. We demystify this with them so that they aren't lost. So the biggest mistake is assuming this is about speaking. And here's part of the problem. The name, selective mutism, is lousy. It implies that these kids are selectively not speaking. That's what meets the eye. That's what you see. But that is that's just a symptom. The not speaking is a symptom. It's about the critical need to understand. So the biggest mistake is seeing a professional working with a school where the focus is on speaking without understanding who that individual is and what may be contributing to the development and maintenance, what's keeping it going despite treatment, and respecting their stages of communication as a way to start to move forward and to know when to bridge up, when to know to bridge down. Because it's okay sometimes to bridge down in a setting that may be very overwhelming, or when someone senses, or when that individual senses a high expectation with someone they're very conditioned with, and understanding what strategies may work best to help move them. So the biggest mistake is focusing on talking when that child is not ready to talk, but they're working on other strategies and interventions to build comfort, to build connection, to increase confidence, which leads to the fuel to communication progression as we educate parents. Another big mistake is thinking you can go to a therapist, send your child back every single week, and not work with the parent. The parents need education and tools. Another big mistake is the lack of accountable, concrete goals for parents, written goals to help them unlearn their conditioned behaviors that may be enabling their child's lack of progress. And the lack of concrete, accountable, written games for young children and goals for the teens or adults. They need those written concrete. Now, look, we make it fun. Sandwich question, action plans, common questions, I Spy games, Mr. and Mrs. Handover for little guys. There's a million games, the I am, I just statements. There's the interview games that are broken down into 50,000 different types. The point I'm making is all of these activities and strategies are integrated into a treatment plan. We need to set the world up. Another problem is IEPs, 504s, giving them rewards for speaking when they're not yet ready. Does this mean, am I implying that you never talk about talking? Absolutely not. We talk about talking all the time, but the child has to be ready for it. And once you help them understand, acknowledge the challenge and feeling comfortable using words, talking about it in that way rather than you need to, you should talk. And we teach those children how to understand themselves, respecting their feelings, 0 to 3 for little guys, 0 to 5 for older folks, and helping them rate and grade their feelings in various situations. It really does help demystify this and deals with that pink elephant in the room. So the family that says to us, are you going to talk about this with my child? My answer back is, we're not going to go up to them in the weight room and say, hey, you're here for selective mutism and we're going to do whatever we can to get you to talk. We help build comfort. We connect with them. We find their strengths and use those big shot roles to increase their confidence. We give them we work through strategies to build that confidence so they see what's happening, and we help them understand the bridge. Kids as young as 3 can make a bridge. It's crazy to see how when they understand this, when they understand their games and they're playing their games and they're getting rewards for game playing, a byproduct is communication progression. A byproduct is comfort, connection, and confidence building. It's amazing to see all that. So the biggest mistake is thinking selective mutism is all about speaking and not. It's a social communication anxiety disorder, and it's about really understanding that person and then developing the treatment plan for them and the school-based accommodations and interventions, and training parents and training school professionals and training educators in a way that they know how to help them in the classroom, because that's where kids spend so much of their time. Another mistake is thinking treatment in an office alone is enough, that they will then on their own go out and do it. Can't be anything further from the truth. And this is why, at least at our program at Communicamp, all day parent education to connect that social identity with parents, but us to train those parents in ways that they have those tools so that when they walk out of that camp every afternoon and after camp, they have so much in their toolbox because we can't go with them. So it's about training. If you're in individual care, it's about learning what your child can do in care and then translating that back to the parents and translating that back to schools and teaching and educating schools. So the biggest mistake is thinking therapy alone is enough. It's not. It's the accountable, concrete games and goals that those kids play, the concrete, accountable goals and written goals that parents do, and the goals that teachers do, the strategies that we teach them, the interventions that aren't hard once they understand, because it's what they do every day, but it's how they question, when they question, where they question, and with who they question. So small groups are great. Buddies are fabulous. But what are you doing in those situations? How are you questioning? I think I said a lot, but I think it was hopefully a way for our listeners to understand you can't just treat to speak. It doesn't work. And you can talk about talking. Yeah. And you can talk about talking, but you need to meet that child where they're at. I have so many kids that are verbal, but they're working on initiation, elaboration, expression, conversation starters, I just statements to expand conversation. We're working on all that.
Yeah, and I guess just to go back to the question at hand, what approaches should be avoided? I would assume you would agree that, saying something like if you talk, you'll get a reward or something like that, like really making it about talking. I think I would assume you would.
I think, yes, you're right with that understanding. However, I have plenty of kids in our practice that we are talking about talking, and they are getting rewards for adding people to their talking club, or we are working on more spontaneous elaboration and expression, but they're ready for it, Brandon. It's about knowing who that child or teen or adult is and meeting them where they're at first. And if you have a child, or if you have a, obviously a teen is a child, and that child is avoidant, is more anxious with the strategies and the interventions being utilized, you need to step back and go, whoa, I need to figure this out, because your child shouldn't be. So for the parents listening, your child should be doing this in an upbeat, positive way and starting to really understand this so that they can build those long-term coping skills.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's one of the beauties we see, in individual care and Communicamp, is these kids are like in camp, they're around other kids that get it. They see that they're not alone, and they're working on strategies and seeing their progression. And that is just so amazing and so empowering for them. And that community is so empowering. And it's about finding that community for parents and kids through Facebook groups, through intensive programs, through support groups. It's very, very important.
All right, let's move on to our fifth and final question for this Ask Doc Theory episode. This is just like a practical concern that we got from a parent. At what point should parents consider professional help for a child who isn't speaking in certain situations? All things considered, what type of specialist should they consult with first?
Yeah, well, if we took all the questions we just did and kind of like summed it all up, it would say that...
We'll tell the person that listened to the episode, and they can answer their own question.
And you can answer this. I wonder how many listeners are listening to this now, like they've reached this point and could answer that question. And how many
hopefully
in the beginning?
A lot.
Yeah, hopefully.
Maybe we can give a quiz and get discount off of treatment.
Yeah, and especially if they, they
well,
really
I want to see if I want to answer the question for this parent, though,
we will. But what I'm saying is, how many could have answered that in the start versus now? And I think you're going to see that so many of our answers already answered this. Number one, a parent should seek help for their child if they see their child struggling or suffering in silence, where the child...
Socially, emotionally, academically.
Yes, and communicatively. Or, not all. Obviously, kids with SM are dysfunctional from a communication standpoint. They may be able to be nonverbal, so they may be getting some of their needs met, but they can't share in a group. They can't advocate for themselves. They can't maybe deal with emergencies. There's so many things they can't do because if they're not using their voice. Because there are kids that get through school and functioning really well, but they're mute. They have friends, but they're mute. Or they have one friend, but they're mute in the majority of settings. You can't go through life like that. You can't. So we have to help them become a more confident, social, verbal communicator. So it's about working with your treatment provider or seeking professional help from a therapist, a mental health therapist, a speech and language pathologist, a physician, even an occupational therapist, an educator in school can help you start to see, is this a concern? socially, emotionally, academically communicative, and then to seek help from a mental health professional, from a physician that has knowledge, a pediatrician, a psychiatrist, in my case, a family physician, a speech and language pathologist.
So they really should reach out to like a selective mutism expert, though, like a smart center. Just have a call with a treatment facility or a treatment center that specializes in SM, because it is so specific. It is so niche.
It is niche. And selectivemutism.org is the nonprofit I started a million years ago. They can certainly seek help there, but they should have a series of questions that they ask that professional as far as how they view this and if that makes sense to them.
Do we have those questions available to them?
So we can certainly seek out those questions, and we can put that in the show notes as to how do these professionals view selective mutism, and, you know, how do they treat selective mutism, and what is their therapeutic approach to selective mutism. And what we want to say to these parents, because I can tell you as a parent, in your gut of gut, you know what feels right. And if that feels right, start there. But your child should be making steady increases. At least, I always say that, like for us, like in school, your child should be making progress for every 10 days. There should be some sort of progress. Your child should be making progress in treatment. It shouldn't just be get comfortable and speak with your provider. Your provider should provide you with accountable written games for your, for the young child, goals for the teens and adults, and parent goals, accountable goals that they are working on to unlearn their conditioned mute behavior, and knowing how to support that child or teen in various settings so that they know what strategies to use for progression. How do you run a play date? What strategies do you use? When you're out and about doing exposures in the real world, how do you approach a store clerk? What supports does your child have? How do you question your child in those settings? How do you keep accountability? And then sharing that accountability, the sheets, the worksheets that you're given, because it's really about unlearning conditioned behavior. And without accountability and then working through that with the treatment provider, I think that's really, really super hard. I want parents to understand there's no right time to reach out. So we have families that might say, wow, my son or daughter has some of these symptoms. Why wouldn't you reach out? There's a lot of resources out there. At the selectivemutismcenter.org, we have 60 some, 70 some podcasts that are all on topics. We have blog articles. I write blog articles almost 2 or 3 a week. We have a resource page that has webinars. We have worksheets. We have so many resources, because I see the selectivemutismcenter.org as not just how do we help assess a child, how do we do testing for kids that we may need to do full battery psychological testings, autism spectrum, ADHD, full, you know what I'm saying? Like, we do that, of course. The selective mutism eval, individual care, intensive treatments, communicamp, we do all that. Virtual groups, but it's a wealth of information that our listeners can go to share with schools for them to learn. Because that was always my passion. When I started selectivemutism.org, the Selective Mutism Association, I did it to be able to bring awareness to what this is and then share those resources, because so many people misunderstand. Sharing resources with pediatricians, with teachers, with family members. I mean, we have something called About My Child that you can give to coaches and parents of friends, of relatives, people that can know how to approach your child, something like that. So simple, but yet so powerful. So I want our families to realize, get that information, learn, and seek out help. It doesn't mean you're committing to this for the rest of your life by any means. I always say to families, give me 6 months. And you will see such progress in that period if you do the goals and strategies that we suggest. And it doesn't even have to be every week of therapy. Like for me, I do the monthly program. I see families every month, but in every month that I see them, we give them a report and concrete goals, concrete games for the young child or goals for the older child, parenting goals. We're working with them every month. Parents fill out follow-up forms. Schools fill out follow-up forms. That helps prepare for the session. Then they have a month plus of work to do. And of course, we're available in between, and we offer weekly and biweekly therapy. But even if it's not us, get that support, get that help, because your child doesn't need to suffer in silence. They don't.
Totally.
They can overcome this. They should not go years struggling in silence or being mute. They absolutely shouldn't. And if that's the case, and they have been, then you need to back up and move forward to figure out what is it about your treatment that can be changed and altered so that your child can make progress.
If anyone has any questions on this episode, anything they heard in this episode, we always encourage people to go to selectivemutismcenter.org/AskDrE, AskDRE, and there's a form there, and answer your question, and we see all your submissions, and we will answer them on podcast episodes like this.
And also reach out to our staff, right? I mean, support at selectivemutismcenter.org. Ask questions. See how we can help. We set up complimentary calls to talk with you about, one, how we may be able to support you, but how to help you. And then in addition, call us, 215-887-5748. We have amazing support staff willing and wanting to help you and provide you with those resources to help you. Look, I do what I do because I love it. I had a child that suffered in silence. My daughter, Sophie, as many of you know, is a fully functioning adult, married, a doctor, living her best life. And as of this episode, about to have a baby. So yes, listeners, I'm going to be a grandma. I have to say that. I'm so excited.
I think we might have to start the episode with this as the teaser.
Yeah, like I just can't wait to be a grandma. But this is my daughter, the one that struggled in silence, that suffered in silence, who couldn't get out of a car to go visit her relatives or was hiding under the slide in preschool. And she's a fully functioning adult with an amazing life, a physician, about to have a baby, living her best life like so many of my families that we've worked with are. So yes, this is a passion. But
she had an unfair advantage, though. She had Dr. E as her mom.
You know what, Brandon? Back then, I was a physician, but I didn't have formal training in this at that point, right? I saw these blurbs in my medical text that said children refusing to speak. That wasn't Sophie. And that's what began to help me understand this is anything but not speaking, because these kids are truly struggling. And they don't want to be mute, and they want to have friends, the majority of them. And I learned along the way so much about who these kids really are. And it's really important that parents listening become those individuals that share this information with their teachers and professionals that they know, because it's so important that people see this in the right way rather than kids that are choosing or refusing to speak.
100%. Well, like I said, I think we had a great episode. A lot of great things that we discussed. A lot of really broad, general questions that we answered. It's not the easiest questions for you to answer because I know I could see you have so many things you want to say. So again, I encourage people to use that form again. Keep asking us questions, and we will get the answers that you guys need. I know there's a lot of people find this podcast when they're trying to make sense of what their kids are going through, but we're here to be a resource. So hope this episode was helpful. And thanks, Dr. E, for your time. And I'm excited to put this out there.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Unspoken Words, a Selective Mutism podcast hosted by me, Dr. E, and the Smart Center. This episode and all episodes of Unspoken Words is produced by New Edition Productions. Don't forget to submit any questions you have from today's episode using our Ask Dr. E form on our website. Just head to selectivemutismcenter.org/askDRE. I'd love to answer your question in a future episode or blog post. Remember, for the best of this episode and every episode of Unspoken Words, please follow the podcast on Instagram and YouTube. We are at Unspoken Words _podcast on Instagram and Unspoken Words by DRE on YouTube. Or join our newsletter for additional SM content. We release new episodes every other Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next time.